Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a terrific guest. This is someone who is a true community leader. She is respected throughout Ponchatoula as someone who's a fantastic mother, wife, businesswoman, advocate for people with special needs. The list could go on and on. I'm talking, of course, about my dear friend, Tammy Earles. Tammy, welcome to the show. Why don't we kick things off with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Parker. Thank you for having me on the Parker Live at 5 show. Um, those were some nice compliments there. Not sure I'll live up to all of that, but
Well, I did my best to keep it short because you deserve much more. You really are one of my heroes.
well, thank you. I kind of start when I came to Tangipahoa Parish. I came to Southeastern as a student in 1986. And I just remained in this area ever since. Greg and I were eventually married. We've been married 39 years. We were both at Southeastern together, and we chose to make this parish our home. We raised our two daughters here, and this became home to us.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Baton Rouge, grew up part of my life in Denham Springs, and then relocated to the metropolis of Bogalusa.
Now, that was the Powell family home, right? Bogalusa?
Yeah. My dad, my maiden name is Powell, and they were all from Bogalusa, so we moved back to Bogalusa. I pretty much just went to high school in Bogalusa, and that's where I met Greg. I was friends with his sister, and opposites certainly attract. We're proof of that.
Brandy and I can relate to that for sure.
We're proof they can make it. You can make it. So, but when we came to college, I joke and say Greg was at Southeastern when I met him. I graduated high school and I came to Southeastern, and then I graduated from Southeastern, and Greg was still at Southeastern. They invited me to sit out a few semesters to take a break. He was working too hard. But anyway, we got married, he graduated, and we stayed in this area. So I'm from I-12, Denham Springs, Louisa, and Hammond.
But like a lot of people, the university brought you here, and then you decided on your own accord to stay here. We had the university as our guest speakers today at Rotary. Homecoming's coming up, and Southeastern's Giving's Day is coming up, and a wonderful Ponchatoula native who's been on the show, was our guest speaker, and she reminds me how important it is. And Southeastern's in its 100th year, so the centennial has arrived. It was a junior college for many years, and then in 1970 became a university. Now it's one of the larger universities around. What was your experience like at Southeastern, and what did you love about it that kind of led you to stay in this community for the rest of your life?
Yeah, Southeastern was great. As a matter of fact, I missed Rotary today because I went to the address by the parish president at Southeastern. So I was at Southeastern.
Right, it was the state of the parish, right? Is that it?
Parish. And as I watched, Robbie on stage and Michelle Sutton. I was in AO Pi with Michelle. Robbie was in Theta Xi. I saw all these community leaders that I graduated with from Southeastern, and I thought, wow, what an accomplishment. We all stayed in this area, give back to this area from what we gained attending Southeastern. And a nice homecoming feeling to see all those people giving back and serving in a parish that we love and that we were brought here for the university. So
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people don't think about the fact that parish president Robbie Miller, who's doing such a good job, is not a native of the area, just like you're not. There's always this mix of what Darren Bennett calls the come heres and the from heres, and you need the right blend, because you have wonderful women of the world, like the two beautiful daughters you raised, who are, from here, Ponchatoula girls. And then you've got the come here's like you that, and we need both. Sometimes our town can get a little too tribalistic and want to stick to the old stuff too much. But I think we all need to remember none of us are from here forever, right? Unless you're Choctaw, you haven't been around for hundreds of years. So I think those of us that have been around, say, the 1890s, like my family, maybe need to get over ourselves and pay closer attention to what you and Robbie and his predecessor, Gordon Burgess, and so many others have done, to improve our community. So you mentioned you and Greg, y'all kind of go there together. You decide to stay here. What's the next chapter in life when you finish up at Southeastern and head into the career world and the family building world?
Yeah, so after leaving Southeastern, I went to work for TARC. I have a master's degree in special education, and I went to work at TARC. I guess I was at TARC about 10 years. And then
And Tammy, can I jump in real quick? When you say you were at TARC 10 years, you mean you were working there. Eventually, I assume you're about to tell us when you worked there as the director, because folks need to know you never left TARC. You're still with us as a board member. You've been the board president. So, but am I correct in assuming you're talking about when you were there as an employee, not as a director?
Right. I was there. I lose track of time, Parker, but I went there and I worked with Sylvia Bush when TARC was one big organization. Options and TARC were one organization, and I ran the residential program. And then I moved away for a short time, and when we came back, TARC had Options had spun off of TARC and created a new program, and TARC was going to start new or continue with the infant program. And I took over there as the director of that program for several years. Before Head Start swooped me away.
Well, as the guy who's in my second year as president of the TARC board, I want to give you a profound thanks, because I've been blown away by what a well-run organization TARC is. While I've been volunteering in a fundraising capacity for TARC for well over a decade, maybe two, I've only been on the board a few years, say maybe 5 years or less. You might remember better than I when you were president, because I think you were the president when I joined the board. And what I noticed was, in lean times, you guys at TARC make the very best use of every dollar that comes in. You're extraordinarily fiscally responsible, which I admire as a guy who often writes checks, to nonprofits. But the heart's in it in a way that I've never seen. Everybody on the board, and especially on the staff, from you to Kathleen Abels when she took those reins for years, to Mike Latino, who is the current CEO of TARC, y'all just care in a way that's very apparent. And it just makes folks like me that have a small role with the organization really proud, to play a part. And so thank you for setting up such a strong foundation that by the time I got there and you guys on the board were foolish enough to hand over the keys to me, I feel like it's got that new adaptive cruise control that keeps me between the lines and far enough away from disaster. What does that organization mean to you? Because clearly it's not just a job. We're talking now, decades later, you're volunteering, and you're a busy mom, grandma, professional wife, etc. What does TARC mean to you that you stick with it all these years?
TARC, when you get involved with a program like that, working with young families who have children with different needs that, didn't know that this was going to be their life to care for their child in a way they didn't know they were going to have to, and they're not prepared for that, and they don't have resources, and that you can be that voice of comfort and services to let them know they're going to be okay. It's going to be a different journey, but it's still going to be a beautiful journey with their child. And I think your heart just gets in it, and you see people thrive and do well, and you become a big family. And then in the early days, I got to see those come in and grow and go to school, and I got to see the adults be able to live independently and work in the community and it's just hard to leave a program like that. And also knowing the fiscal situation that they need help. They need help to maintain the services, and that some of the children would not thrive without these services. I know how critical early intervention is. And so you
Amen.
involved, and then you become friends and connected with the board members. Many of our board members have children with different needs or adults with different needs. And they're such a valuable resource to the board because they've had personal experience with this journey and they can come back.
Right.
So we're grateful for you serving. We're thankful to have some new faces on the board, some young people on the board, and that gives me encouragement and hope that the program will always be supported.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I want to give a few shouts out. Ponchatoula is very well represented on that board at being. I'm sure I'll forget somebody, but Jeff Leschere, who I was just talking to a few minutes ago, comes to mind as a board member. Our assessor, Kevin Rayford, those two guys are best friends. They've been doing everything together their whole life, I guess, 40 years, but many others. And then folks that may live in Hammond but are frequently in Ponchatoula. I mentioned, Mike, our CEO. You weren't able to make Rotary today. You had a very good excuse for your absence, but Mike was there. So, there's a strong park presence, and I appreciate that. Let's change gears here, if you don't mind, and circle back to your personal life. So, you mentioned you and Greg, sweetheart kind of young couple story, and congratulations on all these years. I mean, y'all are such an inspiration for folks like Brandy and me that have only been at it 15 years or so. But if you don't mind, share with us, the journey as your family grows from, just you to the two of you to the beautiful daughters that you raised.
Well, like I said, our girls, Annalie and Abby, were raised here in Ponchatoula. Annalie graduated from Southeastern just like we did, and Abby went on to LSU. They were raised here in First Baptist Church of Ponchatoula. We've been members there for over 30 years. They were toddlers when we joined that church. I attribute that involvement to everyone's success. I don't know without the support and encouragement to our family over the years, going through things families go through, where we would be today, because First Baptist Church has played a big part in enriching our lives for the better. But yes, the girls grew up, graduated college. Abby's now an orthodontist in Baton Rouge. She is married. We gained a wonderful son-in-law, Joe Russo, and they have a little girl, Riley, who's going to be 2 soon, and a little boy on the way in November. And then Annalie also married a wonderful person, Graham, our other son-in-law, and they live in Covington, Madisonville, as of last weekend. And they have boy-girl twins, and a 6-year-old little boy. Landry.
Oh, wow. That's a busy household.
Landry, Archie, and Ella Grace. Yeah. We always counted our 2 girls as our greatest blessing, but I can tell you, just like all grandparents will tell you, when the grandkids come along, it's nothing greater.
That's exactly what my parents tell me. They make me bring my boys over there every week. You mentioned Graham, and he's actually watching the show here. So, Graham, thank you for tuning in. He says that you're the best advisor in Tangi, and of course, a lot of people agree with that. People have been singing your praises for years. Graham, just because you're biased doesn't mean you're wrong, right? That can be very true, mother-in-law or not. Thank you, Graham, for tuning into the show. I'm sure that means a lot to Tammy. For anyone else who's listening or watching live, notice that we have the ability to include your comments in the show if you're watching live here on Facebook. So if you post them, I will do my best as the host of the show to share them with Tammy, as we did with Graham. So, Graham, thank you for that. I'm here with Tammy Earles. Graham, is alluding to her career in financial advising with Edward Jones, and we're going to get to that in a bit. Now, spoiler alert, folks, by law, Tammy is not allowed to give investment advice. So when I mention comments, don't jump on here and ask her what the S&P 500 is going to do or how you can better diversify your portfolio, you're going to need to schedule an appointment to get into all that with her. But I do want to ask you, Tammy, about your career because you have been so successful. You know, I can tell you as a guy in my 40s who was kind of a late to the party. You know, you mentioned your beautiful daughters and their beautiful families, and you know they kind of married up and started having kids at what is probably more traditional pace early in life. You know, I'm a guy who didn't really start having kids till I was almost 40, and in my 40s. And I think, you know, everybody's got a different role with money, with finances, with how we approach it. If you're a bachelor in your 20s, you probably don't care about it the way you do as a dad in your 40s. You and I were talking off camera earlier about what a comfort it's been to my mom, who grew up poor, to have this nice nest egg that she and her financial advisor and my dad, you know, developed over the years that gives her great comfort as she enters a new decade. She had a birthday a few days ago. I'm not going to tell you her age, but I can guess tell you she's an octogenarian now. But you know, if you don't mind, tell us about that. You know, you are a financial advisor with Edward Jones. How did you come into that role, and kind of what does it mean to you? You know, because you seem to really take pride in the services you give, and people are really happy with the job you do.
Yeah. Well, it's just very interesting. I ended up here, Parker. My formal educational training is in education, and I spent 20 years in education between Clark and Head Start. I was the director of the Springfield Head Start program and the Southeastern Head Start program, lastly. During that time, Matt Cotton was a friend of mine, and I never worked for a school system or anywhere where I would have a retirement plan provided. So any saving that I did was on my own. And so I was visiting with Matt and kind of getting burnt out from education, you know, working in education, working in nursing, those are callings. And you get called. Those are like mission fields. And there comes a point in time where you're tired. Even though it's rewarding, it is a calling. And so he saw I was ready to leave that. And Matt said, Tammy, you love teaching, you love educating people. You know, you establish a warm rapport with people. I really want to talk to you about coming to work with me in my office and working for Edward Jones. And it sounded really great. And I enjoyed learning about investing and what it could do for your life and your family. And so I agreed. Had I known at 40 something, the exams I would have to take and the licenses I would have to get after, you know, already having a master's degree, I thought, can I do this? I said, no, you have to be licensed and know things you will never use. And I thought, okay. So yes, in my 40s, I did a drastic career change, and I could not approach this that I was coming to sell investments. That thought mortified me. But I looked at it as educating people.
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, especially women, about investing and what this Greek stuff means and what it can mean for your family and your future. And so I approached it as a new opportunity to educate. And I didn't have to run a school anymore and supervise 200 children and 40 women. And bus routes and all those things. And so it looked like retirement to me, but fun. So here I am.
If you could just get through those darn tests, you know, you remind me, my mom, like you, is a very smart woman with a master's degree. But she, unlike you, she didn't get that master's degree early. She went back to school in her 40s. So I've seen up close and personal back in the days when I was doing high school homework next to her doing grad school homework, you know, how tough it is when you get back into something. In her case, she had to take calculus for the first time in, you know, maybe 3 decades or more. And that's a challenge. So kudos to you for doing that. I'm sure that was a leap of faith that took a great deal of courage to see through and a lot of resiliency and resolve in the moment. Am I wrong, or is that how it went?
When I started, we had to go find clients, including knocking on doors. And we know a lot of people, and people would call. Greg finally agreed to drive me around neighborhoods on a golf cart, and they would call and say, "Is Tammy running for office? I see her on the golf cart knocking on doors."
Right. Wait, they're like, wait, she's going to follow in her Uncle Tank's footsteps. Maybe you'd run for state rep or something.
That's
But
how I started my business, knocking on doors. We don't do that anymore at Edward Jones. We help young people get started by sharing some business with them. So
Yeah.
no more walking through a neighborhood in your business suit and your heels knocking on doors, looking for someone with a need. But that's how I started 18 years ago.
Well, I love your approach to it through the lens of education because, as an attorney, it's a different profession, but we share a lot with financial advisors in that baked into our job in a primary way is advisor. I mean, attorneys are known for our advocacy, but one of the first things we're taught in law school is you wear two hats. The counselor part is the advisor part. And so, we have to educate people, on every case we handle, whether it's a criminal defense case or a personal injury case like I do, or a banking transaction, whatever. Our job is to advise our client so that they can understand all the pros and cons of every nuance and action they might take and make a great decision that protects their interests. You're doing something very similar in the financial realm.
Right.
And, there's really no way to get there, I would imagine, without understanding the person's situation and educating them in a way that they can understand, hey, this risky thing means something different to the 30-year-old with a long tailwind ahead of them in a career than to the 80-something-year-old couple like my parents who don't have any more earning years in front of them. And if you can't break through on kind of an educational level, it's a one-on-one teaching. It's a different animal, or maybe one-on-two or few. But I really like that. I hadn't heard about that, but it kind of makes sense that maybe folks that study education like you are better suited to this than the folks who study finance, because the reality is y'all have a bunch of people in your company that can figure out all the financial stuff, but you probably don't have as many people on the front lines that can kind of earn the trust in the community and then teach folks like me that studied poli-sci what we need to know about money.
The most important thing of your life, your money, your savings, and people don't know what they own or why they own it. And they don't have a plan, and they don't teach this in high school. So it's an education process, and it's important. It's important for both spouses, everyone involved, to understand, because someone's going to be left.
Yeah.
We don't know which one of us, but one of us will be here. And if we both don't know what's going on, it could be bad.
Well, it's like the saying in the law with estate planning, right? I can tell you it was no fun for Brandy and I to sit down with our friend who's a great estate planning attorney and plan our wills and think about, how we want our assets to go where and whether to do a trust for the kids and who gets to take custody of the kids, if we're not there to do it. But it's necessary because the cost of not doing it is so severe. You only really get one chance to do it right. But you mentioned kind of the impact on the family. What I love about your situation is you're a trailblazer here, but it's become the family business. I mean, Graham, who tuned in earlier, your son-in-law, I understand, is also an advisor. And then we've talked a lot about your hubby, Greg. He's watching too. Here's his comment. And by the way, a smart advisor, folks, if you're noticing, he said he agrees with Graham that Tammy's the best advisor in Tangi, even though Greg is also an advisor in Tangi. Smart words there, man. I admire that. But how did that come to be? I mean, when did Greg start thinking about this? And what's it like being a full-fledged Edward Jones family?
Yeah. Well, we love it, first of all. We really do. And so I started 18 years ago. Greg had been in the shipping business and real estate. And he, without his support, I could not have done what I have done with Edward Jones, because it took a lot of support, financial and encouragement, to get to this point. And so I guess, I've lost track of time. It might have been 8 or 9 years ago. Greg and I were just talking, and he's like, we understand this. We're good at this. I think I'm going to join you. And so it's quite the process to be hired at Edward Jones. Some people have said it's easier to get in Harvard, but
Yeah.
we started the process, and Greg had no problem passing the exams, becoming an advisor with Edward Jones, and he just moved in to the branch here in Ponchatoula, where I'm located. So now we have a joint office here, which works out really well. And then Graham.
Yeah, do you guys have one of those desks that faces each other so y'all can work hand in hand? No.
He's on one side of the hall and I'm on the other. We each have our own office manager, and he tells his clients as they're leaving, if you ever become unhappy, you just go across the hall.
So it's not Earls and Earls. It's the Earls office here, the Tammy Earles, Greg Earls, two Earls in one building. But yeah, I think a little space is good for a marriage. You know, you guys are sharing a home and a family and a bed and everything else. Like, hey, having your own room at the office is probably a good idea. Let me ask you this, Tammy. Like, what when you look back, you know, you're not 18 years in, so now we can say without a doubt you've had multiple successful careers where you kind of reached the pinnacle, of both. What advice might you give to someone who's in a similar situation to you? I mean, maybe it's somebody like you who's working in education and special education. I've seen it with so many friends; it takes its toll. Maybe it's somebody very different career, but same kind of story of like, I just can't swing a hammer anymore, or I can't do whatever I'm doing. What advice would you give to someone who's considering a career change and that you think might help them thrive the way that you have?
You know, I would say life is too short to not have a happy ending, and find something you enjoy. You know, I think back and I said, you got to find joy in all circumstances. But if you're not ready to retire, but you just feel like you're not giving 100% anymore or as effective and enjoying what you're doing, go find something else. Do something you enjoy. You can still hold off on that retirement until you're financially ready, but I don't think it's ever too late. I thought back, I said, you know, over the last 30 years, I've worked with families who have children who were born with different needs. I've worked with families who live in extreme poverty under the worst living conditions. And I've worked with multimillionaires. And I have seen the most joyful family living in poverty in the worst conditions. And I have seen the most unhappy, miserable person who has all the wealth in the world.
Right.
And so you have to make your own happy, and don't search for it. Have patience. And, you know, I trusted the Lord, honestly.
Well, let's talk about that. Thank you for mentioning that, because so few people are comfortable talking about the Lord's role in their happiness and their success and in their purpose. You mentioned how great First Baptist Church was for your family when you had little girls. I'm kind of living that now with little boys, and my wife teaches there on Wednesday nights, and the boys do their class. And it's just wonderful. Sunday school, from Sunday school to the sanctuary, it's a great place. But let's talk about the role of, Christ in your life, and because I know you and Greg have such strong faiths, and I'm sure it has guided you as parents, as professionals, as people in every facet. So if you wouldn't mind, share that, with folks, kind of what your feelings are.
I was raised in a Christian home, a Baptist Christian home. We joke because Greg was raised in a Catholic home, and he's a better Baptist than I am. Sometimes, most of the time. He served more than I did with his praise music, but we loved church. We would go to church. We connected. We made good friends at church. And it's not because we're perfect people. You go to church because you're not perfect. So we would go to church. We would get encouraged and be able to go out and face another week. Church helps keep your marriage together sometimes. Good counsel. It helps raise your children. And my girls, I mean, they loved church in their early years, but honestly, throughout their life, on into teen years and early adulthood, that was their activity. I can't count how many mission trips Abby went on. If our church
Mhm.
wasn't going, she found another church that was going.
Yeah.
And it just helped develop and shape them and give them a foundation, I feel, when trials and tribulations come. I'm starting to
Amen.
sound like Annette Garden, but
Well,
she's
yeah, you talk about learning from the
amazing.
best. Great Sunday school
Annette,
teacher that she is.
besides
They
my
will, they
parents,
will come.
Annette would be right up there in being a mentor and an inspiration. Um, yes. So I have had a great experience. First Baptist Church of Ponchatoula, Dr. Cranford, the staff there. Um, I've been there through many preachers. Now he's been there a long time, but we enjoy being involved in the church. Don't serve as much as we used to. Life's a little different now, but definitely has been a blessing in our life through the good times and the bad times.
Yeah. Well, tell Greg we miss his guitar playing. He could jam. He was, but I'm glad that you guys are in a good spot. It's always fun. You mentioned happy endings earlier. And I'm not suggesting this is the end, but it's always fun to see good people like you and Greg with happy endings to what may just be chapters. And you guys have been there thick and thin, from the scariest stuff like his bout with cancer, to all the stuff that goes into raising kids and the tragedies they face and how you have to nurture them through that. And it's just, you guys are an inspiration, and I thank you for that. I promised you at the outset I'd be respectful of your time. We're about at the half-hour mark, which means it's probably time to wrap up. But before we close up, Tammy, I want to ask, is there anything else on your mind, on your heart, anything you want to talk about at all with our viewers and our listeners before we let you go?
Oh goodness, that's an open-ended question.
I ask you that way because I'm not a pro, and so I don't always cover every topic I should. And I
Yeah,
want you to have the opportunity to cover everything you'd like to.
I mean, I think we've covered a lot. We love Tangipahoa Parish. We love Ponchatoula. The community has been good to us. We enjoy being able to have something here. This firm has offered us this branch to be able to serve the local community, and by having the community be able to use our services and our advice, it allows us to give back to the community, and we really appreciate that.
And you serve the community so well in that regard. And I do think you were onto something earlier when you talk about how tough it is to get through the doors, to get vetted and approved by Edward Jones. I've been a long time Edward Jones customer through one of my favorite people from growing up, Scott Lowry. He doesn't live here anymore, but he's from here, and he's an agent across the state. But I've seen people that I went to law school with who were thriving as attorneys give that up because they were so grateful to become Edward Jones advisors. I mean, there's really, I don't know how they do it. It's the same, like, well, how does Chick-fil-A keep getting so many great employees when their competitors can't? But there's a culture there. And when I see you, your husband, your son-in-law, Scott, all these guys that I know that do it, it's like, wow, how do they keep nailing it? If the Saints were that good at drafting, we'd know who our quarterback was going to be and be excited about it right now instead of where we are. So thank you for serving us that way. What were you saying?
Edward Jones is not a publicly traded company. It is employee owned. It's owned by the employees. Greg and I and Graham, we're all limited partners in the firm. So we have a vested interest for good service to be provided. And I believe we were ranked number 7 for best workplace in financial services, number 260 in the Fortune 500 companies.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about culture, I think the firm has given over $47 million to community organizations throughout North America,
Mhm.
and they encourage us to volunteer. I think they had
Yeah.
logged 308,000 hours of volunteer service last year by associates. So
Well,
it aligns with our own personal philosophy.
yeah. And they're getting their money's worth out of you. We covered TARC, but with you, that's just scratching the surface. You were our Rotary president. You've led so many community things. I wish we had time to get in them all. We don't, but I'll just say this on behalf of Ponchatoula, thank you. We're very grateful for all that you and Greg do for our community. So to Tammy, we want to say thanks for her time. To our guests, if you stuck with us this long, thank you for doing that. We'll be back next week. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.